This is Greg Harmon of Deceleration, deceleration.news, an online journal speaking to our shared ecological, political, and cultural crises, seeking out the roots of human and planetary insecurity, movement beyond resistance in pursuit of a sustainable peace. So this is part of a series of podcasts we're doing dedicated to San Antonio's climate action and adaptation plan, a city effort to rapidly reduce our climate pollution while preparing our residents for rapidly escalating extreme weather being brought about by fossil fuel-driven human industry and agriculture. Earlier today, we spoke with representatives of Pocacito, the post-carbon cities of tomorrow, an initiative of the Washington, D.C.-based Ecologic Institute, which is dedicated to building transatlantic solidarity and intellectual exchange around local creative efforts for a renewable economy and planet. So we thought it was a good fit. Unfortunately, we didn't do a very good job of distinguishing who was speaking and when. There's 6 at the table with myself and Marisol. But we do open with Brendan O'Donnell and Max Groening of the Institute. And later in the conversation, you'll meet Charlotte Lovera and Camille Chapuis, as well as Mauro Gil-Fournier and Luis Calderon. We hope you enjoy. We wanted to introduce Pocacito and just spell out what 8 to Infinity is, if you want to speak to that briefly.
I believe Max mentioned Pocacito stands for Post-Carbon Cities of Tomorrow. This is, of course, 2 things. One, it's a reference to resources, carbon resources, and our addiction in America especially, but all over the world, in the industrial world, to that. So post-carbon is not so much an attempt to say this is wrong, this is a terrible thing, but as a way to think, what are the new resources? Once we are post-carbon, what will these resources be? So, and then of course with the tomorrow, focusing on the future. 8 to Infinity is the second iteration of our Pocacito in the U.S. project. The first one was 6 cities from Europe and 6 cities from the United States. This iteration is 8 cities from Europe and 8 cities from the United States. And the 8 to Infinity is so the 8 represents these 8 cities in each area. But then what we like is the idea of that 8 being turned on its side so that it becomes like this infinity, this Mobius strip, if you will. And within that Mobius strip, you've got 2 circles, right? 2 circles that can help be regenerative, that are all about creating a future for itself, but one that's sustainable because it's not relying on one direction, monodirectional resources like carbon. So that's where the 8 to Infinity comes from. The topic of circular economy is one that we decided to approach this year, but we approach it in a way that might be a little different. One, when we talk about economy, we talk about the relationship with resources. And by that, as I alluded to with post-carbon being about imagining new resources, we want to talk about material resources, natural resources, social resources, individual resources. So that's what we mean by economy. We don't mean just business making money. And then with the circular idea, the point was, we see society with these pillars that we rely on, right? And these pillars, we might select a few and notice government or city administration, community organizations, small businesses or business in general, and research institutions or those who are doing development, new ideas. And so what we've talked about doing is trying to round these pillars, right, so that they support each other, that they're not taking up the slack, because that becomes overburdensome on specific areas. But if we round these pillars so that they're all forming together this circle, then what we have is this potential for something that truly is, I believe, inclusive and sustainable. Now, the issue there, of course, becomes what are the points of entry into a circle, right? How do we make sure it's not closed off? And so that's where the people we've invited from Europe come into play, because I think in a lot of ways they represent these nodes, these points where these pillars can round and join each other.
That's what I wanted to ask folks kind of individually, because we talked and got into details about missions and structures of organizations, but I wonder if each of you could very succinctly maybe say how the work that you do, how you define circular or regenerative economy, and how that is reflected in your work, just in a very clear way that people understand. And maybe introduce, say, this is so-and-so speaking, and then the people listening will...
Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
I can start with an example, because we worked for a project. It was about a small house near Nice. It's a city in south of France. And it was a kind of project, like a manifesto project, where we wanted to experiment a lot of things. And we experimented the reusing of the roof tile. In these houses, we needed to remove the roof because it was off. So we removed the tile and we crushed it. We crushed the tile and we mixed with cement mortar to create an ornamental concrete and to draw the terrace with it. And the ornamental concrete was with a pattern which was inspired from the floor, the inside floor of the house, which has been drawn by the owner of the house. So, in a way, everything was circular, because the roof, the terrace, and the story of the
material, the story,
the people. Yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have a very particular vision or thought in terms of what regenerative in your work?
For me, it's like, name it as circular economy or circular whatever. It's like, sorry, but this is more complex than that. So I like to talk about this thing of the urban assemblage, that is how the things are not putting together, but how it works. So, for example, when you design a space in a community or a building or a ministry or whatever, like these 5 questions, very easy you have to think. It's not only about the design of a space, it's how is the mobility of the space, how are you going to go to this space, how it's going to be food and the people is going to make the like the food stuff. Also, how are we going to recycle not only the construction, but in the livable everyday of the space, no, and how is going to be the energy in the space, and the cares of the people working or doing whatever thing. So this thing of complexity of thinking in this at the same time simultaneously. It's more for us about how we think in the development. Could be in a very easy space of community or complex living stuff or something like that.
And Camille and Luis, we're speaking more in terms of maybe labor and cooperative organization.
Well, I have a thought about that, and actually it's just coming now.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking this. I think that in WeShare, what is very important, and which help us to a circular economy, is that one of our thing, and that we want to do each time we do a project, an event, a workshop, we are documenting everything we do. So we have this open source thing within WeShare, so that everyone in WeShare can reuse what have been done already and just improve it. Mm-hmm. That's really something that we believe in and we want to focus on. So as an example, we organize a WeShare Fest, which is our main event that gathers around 3,000 people in Paris, Rio, Barcelona, Medellin. And actually we build these toolkits so that anyone could reuse it. So that instead of just like starting from the ground and that's understanding how logistics works and stuff, we've made that. There is also this part of connecting people. That's every time you connect people, you you simplify the way so that they have the info. So I'm talking with you guys today, and tomorrow we'll talk about something, and we'll re-talk about what we've talked, so then they will get connected. And this is, I think, very important, so that's everything is linked, I think, topics and people, and that's you just need people to go through and speak about it. Mm-hmm. And the third thing we do also is that, of course, zero waste. We have a kit that we reuse, that we lend, that we rent, so that it's not like just like rebuild and rebuild, and it's really something that's for the common. And I think common is also circular economy, because you go back in the common always and you improve them, and then people can reuse it. So yeah, it's
well, in our case, circular economy and sustainability, more than a final objective or the end of the trip, it takes part of our DNA. When we first got together to put this project to work, everyone in their lives had these concepts as usual, as day-to-day way to live. So, for example, in this kind of buildings with so long time with no activity, the work we had to do was huge. So had 100 of square meters of walls that had to be made. There was a collective inside our group that suggested to make it in some sustainable way in order to be compatible with the building, the ability to be removed, not contaminant, things like that. So we used straw bales with finished with bioplaster. So it's the wall can breathe, and it's really sustainable. One example. There are several collectives there, like Taller de Jabones. It's like a soap workshop that recycles the oil from the neighborhood to make this kind of creams and beauty and soaps. Bicycles. We have a workshop that people can make with the bicycle they are not using. We take that machine apart, take that pieces to be used for all the people who came. Some I broke my chain. Something.
We have
like
a little bit of that, Lizard. Cool.
And actually, that kind of segues into a question that was on my mind, which is that I think in the U.S. we don't hear that much about the idea of the circular economy. It's there, but it's kind of more of like an alternative paradigm that's sort of on even marginal to like mainstream environmental movements or environmental justice movements. So very, very small movements like Transition Town or permaculture kind of have some of those ideas, or it's sort of siloed in specific academic disciplines. Like I was introduced as an undergrad to Bill McDonough's book, Cradle to Cradle, but like where he talks a lot about those kinds of ideas, but like aside from that, you don't really hear about those ideas. They're not very mainstream. And so I was just wondering like how extensive or how institutionally taken up within government or within popular movements is the model of the circular economy in Europe, like, and why do you feel like it's, or if you feel it's been more taken up, why is that versus here in the U.S. where we don't really hear that much about it?
Well, I think we have similar issues in Europe too, where there's a lot of people here that they think about waste and recycling only, and they want to only talk about waste streams. And that's, of course, an important part, but it's not at all what the whole idea entails. And especially when we talk about, I wouldn't say maybe breaking the economic structures, but reinventing economic structures, and especially bringing ideas like from regenerative agriculture into basically the economy, into our cities, into our communities, about not having these boom-bust linear developments, but about thinking about ecosystems when you think about our society. That is something that even in Europe is not fully in place, but I would also agree that it's maybe a little bit further and maybe closer to mainstream. It definitely depends who you're talking to. I would assume that if you talk more to industry representatives or high-level politicians, you hear more of the more linear thinking than of the actually deep circular economy.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And if I can just add to that, I think sometimes, and this is my background with language and art a little bit, but sometimes these terminologies become off-putting to the exact people we're trying to communicate with, which is one reason I always mention that by economy we mean our relationship with resources rather than, Dow Jones Index or some corporate measurement of profit. And we see the same thing in other areas of the environmental movement. We've written somewhat extensively on energy, and for example, they have this term energy security, which creates this very defensive, almost violent relationship, and that can be off-putting to people who are not normally, or who've been excluded from the power structures, so that they don't feel like there is that access point for them to participate. This is something that I do feel. I've lived in Europe for quite a while, about 9 years, and I do feel that citizens on the street feel more connected to the broader society than I felt personally, at least, when I lived in the United States full time. So I think a lot of it is this reliance on large power structures in the United States. I also think we were in Pittsburgh recently. There was someone talking about recycling and how in the early 2000s this commingled recycling happened. This pushed people even further away from really understanding the process of breaking down consumption and understanding what recycling and materials actually are. It just became one more bin that everything went into. So I think there is some structural, but I think a lot of it is systemic.
Yeah. And kind of relatedly, like, if you look at some of the writing about circular economy on the, you do a Google search or whatnot, and you see the main hits that come up, it almost seems like it's a solution that's primarily kind of for industry level people, or very technical solution for governments. How does the idea of the circular economy function from the bottom up? Like, how have you seen communities organize around it and sort of take it up on a very local level in their own lives?
Well, let's be clear. Large companies and circular economy, they have not a good match. So, in the way that these large companies has influence in the government, in the administration, it's going to be really difficult to see regulations that permits that the initiatives take place. So in the measure that people can with their vote modificate the party who is going to make that regulations, perhaps we can later see new ways of the laws and what's permit and what's promote, things like that. But by now the landscape is complex. If the popular initiatives, we got enough critical mass of people, it's difficult to think that this is going to happen. But this kind of initiatives, like today, in this beautiful place, perhaps can change a couple of minds and later see something.
For me, it's European Commission. It's planning on circular economy. I mean, it's all the time, every place, circular economy. So for civic and citizen initiatives, it's not, I think, not all about circular economy. It's about the growth, it's about consumption, it's about closeness. It's that. So we cannot use circular economy to talk about how are we going to, fish in the seas, going to Spain, to Madrid. All these kind of things. So the way of thinking economy and the way of thinking urban transformation, it's totally different. It's a controversial stuff between the growth, closeness, and circular economy comes in European and that stuff. Mm-hmm. So in this controversial, we have to build what we can imagine about economy, no? Mm-hmm. But for example, it's also a good tool to understand other transformations, no? We are involved in a project in Madrid that is called Mares of Madrid. Mares means seas. Mm-hmm. In terms of Europe, it's a circular economy process. In terms of Madrid, it's a very social economy, feminist economy process, very local with communities that wants to or can imagine a way to work and to afford living with the things they like to do in the sense of closeness and all the stuff. So I think it's, this tension, this controversial will maintain in the future, but if it's a word or a term that allow us to think further, welcome to develop things.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of sounds like from the bottom up, it's much more about kind of imagining ways of new kinds of social interactions or new forms of relationship to land or resources that might not even exist yet.
I think they exist already.
Uh-huh.
A lot of them, maybe not all, but I think that first, so you have the bottom-up things happening. Okay, we want this, we want people to take care of things, etc. But we need also the city to promote these kind of things, because local consuming locally or not using your car, that are the things that the city need to promote. But I think in France it's not at all the case, and that they're like not yet into this process and thinking resilient. How a city become resilient, and how can, if there is a crash, maybe how can it be rebuilt by itself? And this is not something that I'm thinking about. It's still into business as usual, and that's. So yeah, it's complicated. And we had a lot of events in France lately, like the one in charge of the environmental parts of the government left. So it's just like, okay, what do we do? So a lot of people started go out on the street in Paris, in Marseille, in Rouen, like everywhere in France. And I think it was also a Planet Day, so everyone was up. But it's now a movement. So every Sunday or every 1 month Sunday, people go on the street and protest, and because it's French typical stuff, but we believe that first you need this bottom up, but then the city needs to.
But I think more and more it's coming, because in Paris there is the Institute of Circular Economy, which is a kind of place which promotes a startup which are working about circular economy. And I don't know if it's with money of the city or of the state, but it's really kind of institution stuff. So maybe more little by little.
Yeah.
What I think is important in these processes, and we all acknowledge the importance of the cities and to support and forward these initiatives that are generally and at best citizen-based, that they don't become institutionalized, which then cuts off their potential, right? And that they maintain the citizen-generated evolution rather than something that fulfills somebody else's or some other objective. And that's why what we really try to do with Pocacito, Max started this project in 2013, right, with in Europe as a best practices exchange among city administrations in different cities in the EU, which is great, and it's a network that to this day is still working together and finding ways to collaborate, which is great. But what we developed this project into is an exchange that isn't based on these city initiatives, but rather on people who are doing their own research, finding their own projects, creating their own businesses. And that's what we want to find and connect with when we come to San Antonio. I mentioned this thing about telling new stories, and one of the reasons we're in San Antonio, what it's amazingly, the development, the growth in San Antonio is famous. Yeah, it's talked about all over the country. It's a very large city, which comes as a shock to
fastest growing large city, right?
And that's a surprise to a lot of people. But at the same time, it's celebrating this 300th anniversary of the settling of the city. And this becomes a point where the past and the future are kind of intersecting. So we think it's a perfect time to come here, talk to people, see where the citizens want, or what they want that story to be as we go forward.
Yeah. There's definitely a transition to this. Can we just transition? I was just going to say, it's definitely, we're in a period of that kind of reflection here also, and I think the 300 years prompted, it's also 300 years of colonization, so there's also a strong indigenous, response to that. There's a lot of reflection, it's a time, it's like to look inside, I guess, and particularly because we're developing our first climate plan in San Antonio. In the U.S., we're a little slow. You mentioned some of our consumption patterns and fossil fuel addictions and exports, but this process, the climate planning, is really interesting because we are having conversations about resilience, social resilience, and I try to bring that into that conversation where I see it kind of lacking, and I appreciate what Luis was saying about kind of these individual connections that happen along the way as you do this work. We just had the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco, which is really a recognition that nation states have failed, right, to really engage and commit and move Paris goals, or setting goals that are too low to begin with. But so we're looking at local organizing, regional collective, maybe to the state, not nation state, but
not
state.
Texas, but other states.
But this is also interesting. It comes at a time where the transatlantic relationship is under a lot of stress and a lot of strain also, because of President Trump and kind of moving against NATO, moving against EU, and just and embracing kind of autocratic tendencies in other states. But so do you find, I imagine when you think about your messaging coming into Texas in this international kind of, this shifting kind of international power relations, do you think about the language differently, or is it something you're already deep at a local messaging?
So of course, we're not trying to influence or engage in politics or in international politics or national politics. So our purpose is really to transmit these, basically connect people with ideas and experiences, and just sharing that, and hopefully also connecting people at the individual level or at the local level with their local groups. And of course, our visit is very time limited. Yeah, you notice that, but we hope to expand this, to extend this beyond this time frame with our online community. Of course, we also hope to come back. We've had that in previous tours also, where people had then follow-up exchanges that were either organized by us or not. And that's also part of the whole Pocacito approach, is to, we just set something on the ground here, and then it's not clear what will come out of this. So it's, in a way, a lot of this is just up to everybody participating on both sides. And I think that's very exciting. Some people get scared by this, and very often, especially city administration, they ask, what are the outcomes?
Yeah.
And how can you tell this before the meeting happens, right? You don't know. Maybe people will click or maybe not. And that's exactly that. So we have very positive experiences that also keeps us going, because we see that it works. We see that it actually gives actually people a lot of results later on, but it's not really planned in detail what comes out of this.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
hope you
that's-
felt welcome
yeah.
coming into San Antonio, because you can hit those. I know those bumps in administration, and
Yeah, and we learn to live with that and to embrace that, basically. So it's kind of, in that regard, we're totally with this. Okay, we don't have to go for national politics or state level politics. We bring people together and want to help build community. That's really the purpose.
Yeah, and like you said, building that community, but not limiting it geographically. When you talk about these regional cooperatives or organizations as well, we see the transatlantic potential for those kinds of relationships at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there are international fissures or difficulties in the relationship, maybe on the larger level, but just as we like to reimagine, redefine what community is and can be, we also think that relationship can be defined by the citizens from each place rather than who happens to be in what state house at the moment.
And I think also being a larger group with different people already collaborating together, you get legitimate to go to the public administration saying, hey guys, we are already together, we are making things already, so you need to go in the boat. If not, that it will be problematic for them, and because the citizen won't follow the city anymore because they felt some power being in a big crowd. So
Yep.
I think it's also something that
I think that's how we got a commitment from our climate planning process from our mayor's office to go to the more. We were going to create two plans, a 2-degree plan and a 1.5 degree plan, but as soon as our bureaucrats came back, and I don't mean that derisively, but as soon as our bureaucrats came back from San Francisco, it was clear everybody was doing 1.5, and there was not a political possibility of us going to anything less. So
That's great.
And I have
Yeah, for me, the question is how, for example, in San Antonio, and what you mentioned about the plans, is how we. I mean, I think we need to influence politics. I mean, I'm not Pocacito, I am big, but we as citizens, we need. And the question is how we can take not only better decisions, how we can take decisions in a more inclusive and different way. How we work with the difference and how we can to manage the balance in different questions. You know, how we talk about this river renovation, the water stuff, the marketplace, the building, market, but also the tourists. I mean, this kind of complexity here. So the question is how we, make more softer the institutionality of decision, and not only like you participate in the question of the institution.
right.
So we talk, and for us it's a very important concept about the institutionality of the processes.
Yeah.
So this question is okay. It's not about the plan of the San Antonio environment. Let's talk about specific scenes with a specific projects with specific people, and let's begin with that. And the evolution for me is more circular, that stuff, because if not plans say things that 5 years later it's out of date or for whatever things. I mean, this kind of question. So for a more, I think, direct democracy, we have to think in how we could make space to take decisions, more people together. And that's very complex, but I think that's the only way to understand resiliency, to understand eco-social transformation, and understand these huge points. I think we are on that.
Yeah, it's very important. Thank you for opening.
I wanted to. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, if I may, I think also there is something about democratize these topics, because we're all here aware of the things, what is happening, what could happen, how can we do that, but there is also a huge crowd which is not, I mean, the topics are not mainstream yet, so how do you spread this knowledge, this reflection? And I think it's a very hard thing. I mean, in France, I think it's something also that we it's super hard to make it like ecology. It's a topic that everyone needs to be interested in. When you say that, yeah, I care about the environment and stuff. They're like that's nice, cool. We need people like this. But hey, you can do it also. So that's very. How do you make it mainstream?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think.
How do you make it mainstream, but really sincerely? I mean, not just to be beautiful and green, and because it's good to be green, but like really, how do you do it deeply?
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. And maybe if I can just ask one more question, I think it kind of relates to what you're saying. Like, it's really easy to imagine in the U.S., like, the ideas of the circular economy being co-opted by, companies or governments as a strategy of all it is about increasing efficiency of production and consumption, and therefore making more profit, making growth more easy to come by. But clearly, like, we all know that what is required to address sort of the roots of ecological or climate crisis is actually to reduce the scale of production and consumption, and to move away from economies that are organized around profit, and to sort of reimagine social well-being outside of growth. I've been involved in water struggles and land struggles here in San Antonio for 15 years or so, and it's just apparent to me that, like, one of the roots of those issues is this ideology of growth. Growth at any cost. It's just this taken for granted thing that, of course, you want economic development, and economic development means growth constantly with no end. And so I'm wondering, how does the work you do or the circular economy emphasis intersect with, like, for example, degrowth movements, which I know have a lot more history in Europe than in the U.S. Like, in the U.S., we're only at the very, very beginning of, like, even thinking in those terms, right? To challenge that ideology of growth. Like, do y'all intersect very much with those movements, or how do you dialogue with the idea that we need to not just have a circular economy, but also degrow the economy in order to survive?
I have something to confess, Marisol.
Yes.
I came from the dark side. I've been in business administration for several years until I changed my mind. So I'm afraid that at some level the politics and market are really related. So it's a fact. It's a fact, however, that now in the last market surveys, the sustainability, circular economy, and this kind of sensitiveness, it's been appreciated. People are showing their interest for this kind of things in these market surveys.
Right.
So this is becoming trendy, and that's a fact. And in this way, companies are now using these arguments to sell people their products.
Right.
That finally, it's in some way, perhaps I'm pessimistic in this, but it's what rules the markets.
Right.
So for me, perhaps it's a huge simplification of the problem, but the next time then when you be called from some kind of call center making this kind of market surveys, express this point of view, these ideas. What do you prefer, plastic or recycled paper? Would you like more public transport in your city? Things like that. That be clear in these surveys. In this way, large companies perhaps say, well, we are going to less more, and perhaps we are going to make a happier world if we work in this way.
So in my work, I try to stay clear of the degrowth term because can be very toxic, especially in a U.S. environment. And I personally view this more as the outcome of a more localized, more circular economy, not as the starting point. And I think it's mostly about what we measure and how we measure things. So I don't think if we focus entirely on measurements such as GDP, then of course this looks bad, right? And that's where people then have fear of losing something or missing out on opportunity. Whereas in reality, if I try to be a salesman, I'm trying to sell quality of living, right? So, and a better overall feeling and better psychological health, better physical health, and that's I think more the direction I'm trying to take there in their argumentation. But they are of course very closely linked, and I think we can see that also. You mentioned large corporations, and these are already challenges in itself. I think looking more locally means also looking more at smaller and medium-sized companies, and which are more localized by definition.
Right. Yeah. I think, I'm sorry, I think we've reached the limit of our durability for the day. We've got some obligations, but we hope to see you all tonight. If not tonight, I think you may be sold out tomorrow. I can't remember what you said about
I think you can
Monday
always come.
Okay.
So
squeeze in on Monday. There's a little more room on Tuesday.
Right.
And do you want to make a pitch for folks that may be listening before then to come out to the events?
Well, we have 2 events that are definitely open still. I'm not entirely sure about the lunch event on Monday. So October 1st at 5 p.m. at University of Texas, San Antonio. We have a lecture. Maybe Brendan, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, it's the College of Architecture, Construction, and Planning, and we're going to have 2 of our guests speak on the topic radically collaborative, which is really about reimagining the way that society engages with materials and space and people and work. And so we're very excited about this. There's also a panel discussion afterwards. And then, of course, on Tuesday, we have the workshop at UIW, and then tonight is the town hall forum, where we really do hope to learn at least as much from the public about San Antonio as we can share about what's happening in Europe.
It was wonderful. We're just really thrilled to have you all here, and like I said, I hope you feel welcome and that we can, deepen some of these individual and localized and concepts and collaborations.
If any of you are looking for a place to publish any of the ideas that sort of motivate your work, we always take contributing writers. So the email address, you can send it to editor@deceleration.news.
Okay.
And
well, we do too, actually. So.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Yeah.
And we have your card.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Great.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deceleration is a joint effort of myself and my wonderful partner, Marisol Cortez, and we blog, write every once in a while at deceleration.news, and every once in a while throw out one of these podcasts. But we'll be trying to do a little bit more as San Antonio pushes through with its climate plan. A great opportunity for community dialogue. See you next time.